Alright, hi everyone. My name is Jeanette, and this is our second student video from the Art Institute IGDA Game Development Project. For those who aren't familiar with it, our student group is creating a video game together. And to help initiate newer students and share knowledge, we've been holding live webinars where we're taking a piece of game art from concept to finalized asset. These videos are the offline versions of those webinar presentations for people who missed it, or maybe just want to recap or go into some more detail. In the online version, we will be creating a environmental asset, a piece of foliage, and on this version, the offline version, we're going to be creating a character. So let's jump right into our second video where we'll be covering digital concept art in Photoshop. So the first thing to do is decide what you're working on. And I'm going to be creating a small creature for this series. I want something that I can use different techniques on. And I decided to refine one of the ideas that we came up with. This was the original concept, which was like a flesh-eating bunny, because our game is themed around nightmares. But we decided to go in like a darker, more demonic route. So this won't really work for what we have anymore. We did some adjustments to it. Somebody else had done another refinement trying to turn it into like a zombie bunny, but it just still didn't feel right. So we kept playing with it, and we kind of like got onto the idea of like, the Heartless in Kingdom Hearts, more like generic monsters that could fit into any level rather than necessarily like a bunny, which was for our evil forest level. We wanted something that could kind of like be placed into any level. So we came up with this gremlin concept type thing, but it kind of lost some of the base idea, which was that we wanted something that was a little bit more, it could almost be cute, but it was freaky at the same time. And he kind of fits the bill, but he's a little not too cute. So we're gonna do another variation, kind of try to find a middle ground between this and our original flesh-eating bunny concept. So as you can tell, the first step when doing concept art is to get your references, get your inspiration, decide what it is that you need to do. If you're looking for something in particular, it's good to know where you're going. Sometimes you're just going to be drawing for the heck of it, and that's completely cool. But even then, you might want to have some references just on whatever topic or just something that inspires you, even something that you find interesting from color or perspective or form, something to latch onto. It can just help give you a little bit of direction, even if you don't end up referencing it at all. So I'm going to minimize this. The last thing that I do have here actually is my color scheme, and this is the color guide that we created for our game. Primary colors are purples and black, secondary colors are red and teal, and the tertiaries are blue and like this sickly green color. So as you can tell, part of my work is already done because I have a color scheme. But if you don't have this is okay. That's fine. It's just something that you'll have to keep in mind for creating a color scheme in a little bit. So we have our references, we have our guides. I'm going to keep those here on my monitor so I can look at them. And sometimes I'll switch it. I have two monitors, so I just move it over to my other one. That way I can look at it while I'm drawing. So that is the benefit of having two monitors. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, from the last video, I'm in my digital painting UI, and I'm going to make sure that my brushes are set. So I'm going to replace my brushes with the Photoshop brushes Jeanette Basics. For those who maybe don't have those yet, they are available on Drive, and I'll also include a link in the video and on the forums, so that you can download those if you'd like to use them. I can't take credit for them all, but I can't also give credit to them all because I've collected them over years, and I honestly don't remember where each one came from. I know that some of them came from magazines, some came from controlpaint.com, some from people on DeviantArt. So they're all brushes that people made public, were for free to use. So thank you for those people who made them. And a couple of them I made myself. And we'll go over making custom brushes again in a little bit. So that's good. We're all on the same page. We have our interface set up. We have our brushes loaded. I'm going to go ahead and create a new document. And I like to work at kind of like a medium resolution. My end images are normally around 1,000 pixels wide. So the minimum I'll work is normally twice of that, like 2,000. I'm going to bump it up a little bit. We'll say 4,000 width and I don't know, like 3,300 wide. I'm just pulling that number out, but I kind of always try to go for a canvas that's a little more wide than it is tall, just because that works well on a monitor setup. But there are some times when you might want a tall canvas. That's fine too. It's just for concept art, if I'm just creating a creature and I'm not too worried about composition or anything, then I work on what suits my monitor best. So I think one of the most important things is that I never really work on white or with a black pencil. I very generally try to stay away from black or white as a whole. I just find that it kind of desaturates things. So the first thing I'll do is I'll pick my block in brush, and I'm actually going to make my image smaller real quick, so make it like 400. And this is something I picked up from Control Paint. Just a small canvas size is a little easier to fill in with some of these brushes. And I'm just gonna, as you can see, I'm not really doing anything. I'm just filling it in with a very light stroke with my block in brush. And then I will change that back up to 4000 and set it to bicubic sharper. And what that does is it just makes the image large again, but it also brings out these strokes a bit more. I'm going to shift it just a little bit brighter, I think. And I can do that by hitting Control U. And I'm just going to turn the lightness up a little bit, just because I don't want it to be too dark. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to grab my basic smooth SP brush, which is generally what I use for sketching. And I'm going to pick a nice dark color, but that's not quite on the pure black side. Normally saturated a little bit, and I normally work in the reds, but whatever tone you want, doesn't really matter at this point. And I'm just gonna start sketching. So one of the things, like I said, that we wanted it to do was kind of like a cuter thing, and I think one of the things that helps with that is generally like a larger head shape. So I'm gonna start drawing it out. Um, I know, like from just what I'm thinking, I want a biped, so I'm starting to just kind of think about the head shape, size, and maybe the body comes off proportionally wise. It's gonna you know not be like normal proportions. Like I said, I want it to be a bit cuter, so but like not too cute either. So I kind of got that. I'm gonna use my move tool, just move him up a little bit because I drew him a little low, and let me give him like some legs. Legs are good. I know I want to do a biped, just because it's something that we don't really have. I think his legs might be a little too long. We'll see. I'm gonna play with it. I'm just kind of feeling out proportions and this, how I want him to look. I'm not really sure yet. One of the things that we had played with was doing this like split open bone arm thing. So I'm just gonna try to do a little bit of that. But as you can tell, I'm not really focusing on the details too much at this point. I'm just kind of focusing on the overall shape. I'm gonna erase that arm. It felt a little weird. Give him some longer, weird feet things. So it's not quite like a normal foot. It's not quite a claw. So kind of somewhere in between, like a humanoid and a monstery demon creature. It's feeling okay. His legs are a little long though. So I'm going to just take a selection from the lasso tool. I'm going to just select his legs, and I'm going to just hit Control T to get the transform, and then I'm going to just scale that up by dragging this just to give him a little less height. It feels a bit better. And he needs some kind of design element, I want him to be a little nightmare-y, so maybe some like spiky things coming off of his head. Shape him a bit more, give him some definition. He's gonna have like a little pot belly. Now you can tell I'm starting to fill it out, but I'm thinking about the three-dimensional shape. So one thing I see that a lot of people do is like when they draw, they just go like this for the outline of the face, and that creates like a very flat sort of look. You really want to think about the 3D shape, the form of it, more than just the silhouette. So, like when I draw, like I'll think about these center lines. This is the center of the head, and it runs down the center of the face, and then this would be the body, and this part kind of bulges out because he has a little stomach. So, think about the 3D form as well as the silhouette. Both are very important. His hands are just a little bit long, so I'm going to shorten those up a little. That was actually just where his wrist cut off, so I want to make sure I have room to put a hand in there. So your wrist around the mid-thigh level. So, and then give him like a nice creepy long finger. Maybe he doesn't have thumbs. I don't know. I don't know what he is at this point. That's the beauty of this stage, is that you kind of get to figure it out. I know I want to do something different with his face. I don't want it to be, like eye, mouth, because even though that's, fine, I don't know. I just feel like playing up something a little different. So I'm gonna give him like some wide set eyes that are maybe like more on the, maybe even a little lower, like a low set eye. So I'm gonna do like down here. Ooh, he's like upside down face almost. They kind of bulge out. And then maybe his mouth is like actually like in between. That's kind of creepy. Got that cute vibe a little bit. So now what I want to do is kind of just test the silhouette. Like I'm not sure about the proportions a little bit. So I'm gonna create a new layer and get my absolute hard, and I'm gonna just pick like a slightly lighter color, and I'm going to just fill him in real quick. And you can do this any way you want. You could make him into a selection and then use the fill tool. You can, what I'm doing is just using the brush tool to just fill it in real quick. But whatever works for you. And I'm not worried too much about the fidelity of that. It doesn't have to align with the drawing perfectly. I'm just trying to get the proportions filled out so I can sort of take a look at him in a more weighted sense. I think working in just a sketch is fine too, but if you really want to feel him sometimes and feel how the shape is working, I think that painting it out can help with that. Looking at the shape. So then I'll just turn that off, and I'm liking it for the most part. You can definitely tell what he is. He's got some shape to him. He's got a little bit of uniqueness in the head shape, and the arm gets lost in here a little bit. I might want to redraw it at a wider angle, or maybe like held out or something. I'm not really sure. The eye definitely feels a little funny, but I think that's okay, because I think when we draw it in, it gets clearer to find. And the reason it feels a little funny is because it doesn't pop out on this side. So if I maybe make it a little wider, it kind of feels a bit more normal-ish. Maybe make it a little less poppy on this side. But yeah, I think it works. You can tell what it is. It has a neat silhouette. I think it'll stand out in game. So from there, I'm going to turn that back off, get a new layer, and go back to my dark color, get back to my basic smooth, and I'm going to just zoom in a little bit. I'm going to make that one lighter, and I'm going to start refining my drawing. It's really important to draw lightly, vary your line weight. You want to have some variation in things. You don't want everything to be the exact same. So I'm going to start playing with this. I'm drawing the wrong layer. And just to make sure, if you're ever confused, you can always name your layers. So maybe I'll name this one Sketch, and this one Refined, and this one will be Base. And I normally just leave my background layer alone at this point. I don't really need it, so I'm just gonna leave it. So yeah, I'm thinking like kind of like a jagged, weird mouth that kind of goes up, like the lower jaw is outwards. And then it would open. Maybe I'll draw it open here just so we can see how that would open. But it would actually the lower jaw would drop down instead. So if the mouth was open, it would open this way. And then his upper mouth would be here. And then, maybe he's got some weird jagged teeth in here. And I'm not really focusing too much on detail, but I am going to start thinking more about like how this is constructed. Does this, how do the muscles form around here? The eye, he's going to need like some space to actually form like an eyelid type thing. Is it more like a chameleon eye where it kind of sticks out? This is maybe the crease for where it folds. And I want it to pop out of his eye, so it's going to kind of like cover up the bottom part. It kind of comes in pretty far. Maybe like a really small, weird thing. I don't know. Give him like a little chin point. So now it's looking much more organic. And there's the top. Then maybe this part kind of pops out a little bit. He's got like a really heavy brow. Start drawing like the top of like the brow muscle. So wiggle them brows, and then naturally, like this would form like a crease here. And you'll kind of find that if you think about like the shapes of what's underlying it more than just what's on the surface, that those will kind of very naturally pop out. Like we have the eye here, so it forms this crease, and then this crease, it's kind of inset, and that forms the brow. And then because the brow is outset, you might have a crease here, and then this part kind of comes out in like a more rounded shape. So maybe we'll just shade the side of this a little bit. I don't really shade too much my drawings. It's just personal style, and everyone's different. But I do find it's helpful to define your form a little bit at least. Even if you don't want to do like a full shading, just a little bit here and there will help give it a little bit more, oomph. And he's got like these weird little pupils. He's looking kind of freaky. All right. So from here, I'm gonna give him some horns. Like I said, give him a bit more shape, more personality. I want him to be kind of like a curved, spirally, weird horn thing. And even though he's a symmetrical character, I'm purposely modeling him completely symmetric so that I'm designing him symmetrically so that I can flip it inside 3ds Max. I'm going to take all of these layers, all 3 of them, and I can do that by clicking the first, holding down Shift, and then clicking the last. I'm going to just shift them down a little bit. Grab my move tool, drag them down, and just so I can have a little bit more room up here. Go back to my refined layer. And grab back my brush tool and go back to defining that. I kind of want like a third horn up here. And those 2 on the side will have like more of a spiral, but because I'm doing a symmetric design, I need to keep in mind that I can't do like a spiral here because it's going to be mirrored. So if I tried to spiral it, it would actually be like more of like a point, which is okay. That's nothing. That's fine too. But I'm gonna make it more like a rounded shape, and kind of just draw some like sketchy lines. And you notice that there's some variation. I have some that are darker, I have some that are lighter, and I kind of always try to keep in mind that varied line weight is much more visually interesting to look at and give it some horniness to it. I don't know. So now it's got this kind of like head crown thing. I'm going to move down and start defining the body. He doesn't really have much of a neck at this point. I'm not sure. I think I might give him a little bit more. Not a lot, but just a little head space. So rather than do anything with the bottom, I'm just going to move this whole thing up a little bit just to give him some space. And I'm pretty much done with the area of the base sketch, so I'll grab my eraser tool and just erase that out just so I don't get confused by those lines. So now he has some space between his head and his body, so I'm going to just draw his shoulder, and I'm going to keep his shoulder collar where it was, and now just kind of ease that into his neck a bit more. So So I don't really have to do a huge change, but now it just feels like he has a bit more control of his head, like his head isn't like merging into his body. And create kind of, like I said, it's kind of a humanoid-ish character, so I'm going to create some human-ish anatomy. Not too realistic though, but a little bit. Give him like a little peck kind of shape, and then kind of take that down into the belly range. Make him a little chunky. I kind of want him to have like a bit of like a more arched look though, I think. So I'm actually not liking that. So I'm going to take this whole thing and shift it over just a little bit. Still want that kind of weird belly, but I want him to be just a bit more arched. So I'm going to draw myself a guide, kind of think about his spine going down. Maybe he's like more a little hunched over. And sometimes I'll run into this where I know what I want, but I'm just not quite sure how to get it. That's okay. You know, sometimes that happens. Just kind of keep playing with it. Don't get too hung up on the details. Just keep thinking about it as an overall. A lot of the times, you know, just working on other parts of it will make other things kind of fit in better. So just thinking about how this is connected. You know, got the muscles from the chest coming out into the arm, and give him like some really spindly little arms. Don't want him to be too aggressive looking, because he is supposed to be like one of the more like kind of cutesy characters. Not necessarily cute, but you know, he's like a low level enemy. He's kind of like the heartless guy. He's everywhere. I don't like that spike. It's coming out at a weird angle, so I just want to give him some details. You know, make him a bit more interesting. So. And we're also repeating elements from on his head, and that kind of makes him feel a bit more cohesive, you know, like sometimes dogs have, you know, on their front elbows where their paws are, they'll have like those tufts on the back of the leg, and then, you know, on their back leg, they'll also have like a tuft type thing. Just repeating elements like that kind of helps make it all feel tied together. So give it like a little bit of like an elbow where the elbow would bend in. And I'm going to keep that really thin look. So I'm going to do that there. And I'm kind of giving him like a divide in the arm. He's got like actually like a hole there in his arm where it's like split off. And then we have to think about how that would affect construction a little bit. You know, maybe he has like a bit of a bigger gap between his two fingers than I had imagined. And that's okay. The whole point is to, you know, kind of go with it. You want to be in control of it, but at the same time never be afraid to explore where your drawing takes you. Give him some knuckles and then down into the point. And I'm just going to give him like these long weird tapered claw things. I'm liking it. Just give him a bit more volume here on the belly. Show that it's, you know, actually going under. I'm going to do kind of like a androgynous non-genital area. I'm going to do the same thing with the thighs. Go for like a very narrow look. Give them some little kneecappy things. A little bit of a bulge on the back of the calf, and then have it come much wider. I'm not actually going to do the split in the leg. I think having it just in the arm is fine. And that's kind of, you know, you do want to repeat elements, but at the same time you want things to be unique. You know, if you have spikes all over this entire guy, then the spikes no longer become that interesting because he's just a big spike ball. Whereas if you just keep it to a couple regions, then it's much more interesting of an effect. Give him a little bulge for that thigh. And those claw thingies on his feet. I'm kind of giving him like a divot up the front of his calf. So his calf is kind of made of like two ridge areas. So it's like that part goes out and then that part goes out, and then it kind of has a split here where it goes in. And then, so it's important to think about kind of how it's constructed. Even in this stage, especially if it's something that I'm going to be modeling, I do like to think about how I'm going to construct it. There's some things that I know just aren't going to necessarily work for our project. So I do like to keep in mind limitations. Sometimes it's good to have them because it forces you to think more creatively about how you're going to approach certain things. That's his elbow. So, for example, these spikes might be kind of like a difficult thing to do in like a really high definition, but because I know I know some techniques, so I'll probably like just model the arm here and then create those as like a plane. And that's fine. Sometimes I'll just write that out, just kind of mark it down for myself so I don't forget. And I want to give him some very clearly defined shape in his hands. So I actually drew this from a kind of like a weird angle there. It's not quite a side view or a front view. So at this angle, it should be kind of going out to the sides. We wouldn't necessarily see that hole or the spikes because they're more on the back side. So we might see just a hint of it, but not too much. Have that large knuckle joint. And then go down into the claw. At this point, I need to decide if I want him to have thumbs, I think. I don't think so. I think he's a little minion-y guy. He doesn't necessarily need claws. He's just there to go chomp on people with his weird mouth thing. At this point, I'm almost done. I'm going to erase these little arrows. And I think I want to give him a tail because I like tails. And I don't know. I want to add something to him. I'm just going to give him like a short tail though. Not like too long, but a little. And what I'm doing here is I'm visualizing that there's a circle here. We're at the base of his back. So this would be the center line of his back maybe. And, that would be the other side. And, where does that tail come out? It would be kind of like over here. And I'm just visualizing that. I didn't draw it. I don't sometimes, just because I am visualizing it. But it's always a good idea to draw out your lines, if you are having trouble kind of getting those things accurate. So he's going to have like a really short, like stubby-ish kind of tail. It's not like a super long swishy one, just little thing. I like it for the most part. I think he needs something in the torso and leg region. Like the arms are feeling very special, and this is kind of feeling a little blurred. So I think we're gonna give him like a rock covering. Like his arms and stuff are kind of like a hardened material, like scales. Not rocks, but like scales. And then that kind of comes into his body a bit. And his head area, like his horns, would be like that very hard thing, and then it comes down into softer flesh. And I'll just kind of draw like some light marks to kind of indicate that that's an area effect. And then maybe it has some like vein type things. And maybe that's something I want to do with an actual like effect on him, like a glowing type thing. Yeah. We are going for a nightmare game, so our enemies have a lot of glowing effects on them, a lot of weird veiny markings, just kind of little holes in their skin for no reason. Not for no reason, it's just for design elements, but trying to think about how to make it interesting and different. So I like him. I think that's pretty good. I'm just going to draw a couple more markings on his tail, kind of indicate that the top of that might be that other material. And he's pretty good. I'm going to start working in color now, so I'm going to turn that base back on. And as you can tell, I changed it, so I'm going to need to update that to fit the new silhouette a little bit better. Just going to I'm just gonna start painting that in. I'm gonna change my eraser to the absolute hard as well, so that way I can erase out and draw at 100% opacity. So that's what I use that brush for. Anything that I want to be 100% on or off is my absolute hard brush. And basically the settings on that just mean that it's not pressure sensitive. So this is me hitting it light and this is me hitting it hard. The size changes, but the opacity does not. It's always at 100%. And I'm just going to refine that. I'm still not too worried about going out of the lines a little bit. You know, I'm just not a very... Alright, sorry about that. My Cam Studio was acting a little weird. So all I did was just finish up fixing that silhouette and just turning off the lines. I just want to see now that the head is much more clearly defined, I think it feels better. I think the center horn is feeling a bit superfluous. I'm not really sure that it's necessary, so I'm just going to move all of these down a little bit. He's a little close to the top, and I'm just going to erase that and select my base layer and just erase out the center horn and maybe give him like a bit more of like a dipped head. And then I'm not going to change the drawing yet. I'm just going to turn those off and see. Yeah, I like that better. It's more clear. It doesn't feel necessary to have that extra center horn. So I'm going to go ahead and change my refined sketch. Just erase that and go back to my dark color, get my basic smooth, and just draw back in my edge of the head. I'm just going to give him a little bit of like a lumpy effect. Alright, so at this point he is pretty much good to go. I'm ready to start actually coloring on him. One of the things that we decided in our game pretty early on is that we wanted to have a unified color scheme through the game. Because it's supposed to be a nightmare realm, we felt like it should all kind of look like it's from like the same nightmare, and we kind of picked like one scheme. So if you'll remember, I had that earlier. I'm going to just go down here and get that. I'm going to just click and drag right on top of Photoshop until Photoshop expands, and then move my mouse up into the canvas, and you'll notice it turns into a little plus icon. I'm going to drop it to place the file directly in my layer. I'm going to move it up here, and at this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a palette. So I'm going to hit Control N, and I'm going to set the dimensions to like 150 by 150, so it's pretty small. And then I'm going to click and drag up here at where it says Untitled 2, and I'm going to move it so that it's just on its own, and it's not docked up at the top anymore. To redock it, I could move it until that border turns blue, but I don't want to leave it docked, I want to leave it undocked, and I'm just going to move it down here into the corner and expand it a bit so that it kind of covers this bottom region a little bit. And I'm going to Control plus to zoom in so it's just in this region. And now I'm going to take my basic smooth brush and I'm going to just sample some of these colors. And I do this to just create a small area where I can pick colors from without having to constantly turn off and on layers or anything like that. And I'm just picking all these different colors. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to kind of get a good representation of this color scheme so that I have a starting point. And I will, with a color scheme, I think it's important to at least have some variation on this. So there are times like, yes, I will stick with this color scheme, but there are always times when you'll need to vary outside a little bit, so don't feel like it has to be 100%. And then I'm just going to get our pop colors. So the way that we created our scheme is that we wanted to have, most of the game rely on these blacks and purples, and then we're going to use the secondary colors of red and teal, and then our tertiary colors are blue and green. So now I have that over here. I'm just going to leave this document right there. I'm going to go back to my Untitled 1 and go back over to that and then just turn this layer off. But I'm not going to delete it just in case I do need to reference something in particular there. I like to have it. So working with color is really interesting, and this is one of the coolest things I think with Photoshop is that you can lock the image transparency. So to do that, just click this little grid icon at the top of the layers panel. It says lock, and if you hover over it, it'll say lock transparent pixels. What that does is basically, just looking at this layer, anything that is colored on that layer. So if I turn off the background, you can see this area is all transparent and this area is colored. Anything that is colored can still be affected, and anything that is transparent cannot. So, so a really good sorry about this starting and stopping. My Cam Studio likes to make my Photoshop behave a little funny. So a really good example of this is when I'm ready to start painting. I will lock the layer and then select my brush. I'm just going to pick my everything brush at this point. And I'm ready to start painting. So I'm going to hold down my Alt key and I'm going to just pick a color from our base over here. I'm going to make him kind of like a darker purple as his base. And now I can paint that in, and as you can see, it doesn't affect anything else. I'm going to turn my refined layer back on, and I'm going to darken it a little bit, so hit Control U and then just darken it, just so I can see it a little bit better. And then I'm going to select a slightly lighter color, and I'm going to get my I'm going to stick with my light brush. I'm going to set my opacity and my flow down just a little bit and start kind of shading in the forms. So this is another area where I like to work dark to light, and I like to think about 3D. So I'm thinking like the light source is kind of like a neutral sort of top forward. So I'm shading in the tops of him. I'm shading in like the top of his belly a bit and kind of leaving the bottom bare. And you'll notice that like some areas are brighter and then some areas are darker, and that's just the pen pressure setting. So like as I push lightly, it just adds a little bit, and as I push darkly, it adds a lot of color. Another thing you'll notice is that no matter how much I paint, it doesn't go outside of the lines because of that locked transparency, which is so great. One of my favorite things for sure. So just kind of giving him some form. I'm going to give him a bit more of a red hue, so I'm just going to grab a red and very lightly paint over the whole thing. So it's kind of halfway in between purple and red. And that's kind of like where you see, you know, I'm using the color that is provided, but not necessarily as is. I'm combining it and creating new things. I'm going to create kind of like a lighter section on him. I think I'm going to make it like this lightish red. So I know like these horned, like spiked areas, I want to be like a kind of different color. So I'm going to go with a more reddish hue for that. Down into the hand. So his hands, his feet, his spiked head area would be a bit more red, while his fleshy areas would be a bit more purple. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, yeah, and I need to pick a pop color for him. And this is kind of like, you know, like your color theory. You know, red and purple are right next to each other on the color wheel. So I want something that's a little bit different. So I'm in this range right now, so I might pick something that's over down here. Hold on, my dog's barking. Sorry. So again, so with color theory and everything, you just kind of have to think the colors that generally pop up out of these colors would be opposites. So the opposite of purple would be like a yellowy color, and the opposite of red would be like a more green color. So I'm gonna go for this sort of thing. Now I am gonna create this on a separate layer just because I'm not 100% sure what color I'm gonna go for. So I'm gonna just paint in his eyes, maybe give those like a pop. I'm not sure exactly how I'm gonna use this yet. Maybe the inside of his mouth even glows. It's kind of, I'm painting the inside of his mouth, but not where his teeth are. So it kind of has like that glowing, breathy effect. I like that. I like the colors. One thing you'll notice is that it's going out of balance here. And the reason that is so is because I only have the transparency locked on the base layer. It's not affecting this layer. So one thing you might want to do is, if you're working on multiple layers, is to create a layer mask. To do that, I'm going to create a new group, and I'm going to put both of these layers inside of it. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and put everything inside of it, and just make sure that the order is the same. I'm going to select the base layer, which is the one that has my silhouette defined, and I'm going to use my magic wand tool, which is the shortcut W. Magic Wand will select everything that's all the same color, or opacity, or similar thing. And you can set the settings for how tolerant it is of other colors over here. So for example, if I click the purple, it selects the dark purples and it leaves the reds alone. Or if I select the light purple, it'll just change that. You can change the settings to be contiguous, which means they have to be touching. So an example here is like if I want this transparent area in the arm, I would leave contiguous on, and it will only select that area. I want to select everything that's transparent, so I'm going to click out here with contiguous turned off. It will select the transparency both in the arm and outside. I'm going to click on the top group, and I'm going to apply a layer mask by clicking the Add Layer Mask button. Now you notice this kind of turns everything invisible, and the reason is because it turns whatever you have selected into the visible area. So my layer mask right now is backwards. All I need to do to change that is with my layer mask selected, click the Properties button or go to Window Properties if it's not open, and click the Invert button. So that will now invert that. And now you'll notice that all of these layers have that layer mask defined. So with the layer mask turned off, you'll notice the green and sketches come outside, and with the layer mask enabled, the green is now cut off nice and clear. This is really great for if you want to create a really sharp silhouette. So now, even if I turn my sketches off and everything, he has a very, very clearly defined shape. My layer mask is not very nice because my base layer was just kind of like sketchy blobs. Normally if I'm doing something I want really sharp, then I will spend a bit more time making a nice base layer or layer mask so that it does have a nice sharp clear angle or silhouette. Okay. So I'm liking the green as the pop color. I'm going to create another new layer here, and what I want to do is I want to just create like some darker areas to make this kind of pop out a bit more. So I'm going to sample my color here, and I just want to make sure that it's not pure black. I never work in pure black or pure white or really anything along this fully desaturated line, and I never work with anything that's really fully along this line of the saturation either. This sweet spot is kind of this middle desaturated kind of dark region in here. The reason that this is so is because if you have, let's say, this really bright purple and then you have this really bright red or pink or whatever, they kind of lose their effect because they're both competing with each other so much. So I try to keep most of my tones to like a darker desaturated area, and then only use more saturated bright colors for emphasis and effects and stuff like that. It kind of makes them feel more special. So again, I'm just going to sample my color, make sure that it's not too dark or too saturated. That's in a good spot. What I want to do is just paint, like I said, like a darker area here. And then I will sample that red again. And I want to make these like little spots that I drew, like the red part. So I'm just going to color those in red. So it's kind of like a darker skin effect with like a red overlay of these spots on him. I'll do the same thing up here, just kind of give him like a skin that's darker, and then make the red like this, like the red part is the hard edges. So it's important to think about like what your character is composed of. You know, what is he actually made out of? How does his skin, look? Is it soft? Is it shiny? So maybe I want to start painting in some texture. I want to give him a little bit of like a glossier skin. So I'm going to get an airbrush, and I'm just going to very lightly paint like a very light highlight here. And what that does is you can see, like, just with a little bit of lighting there, he now looks like he has some, like, a rubbery effect to his skin. One of the things I get asked a lot is, why don't I use the dodge and burn tools more? It's just personal preference. You certainly can. One thing that I notice is that dodge and burn, I just don't get as much of a direct control as I would like. It's just, like I said, a personal preference, but I like having a lot of control over my colors. So I do generally tend to create my own palettes and my own colors manually by selecting. But it's definitely an option. So never feel like you can't do that just because you don't see me doing something. You know, everyone has their own method. So play around with it, find what works for you. So I think the eyes are a little overwhelming. It's kind of taking away from the glow effect. It's just a little bit much. So I'm actually gonna, I think, make it like a this is the eye layer, so I'm gonna just make it like a blackish green eye, like a really dark teal. I'm gonna go back to my other brush and just paint that in. And then maybe just the pupils have like a brighter glow. I'm not sure. Just kind of play around with it. The eyes also need some coloring. I'm going to shift it to a slightly more yellow range because I want it to be noticeable that they're teeth. Just going to paint that in. He's got these like jagged little chomps. And I think he's almost done, you know. I'm not worried too much about making, like I said, like a final illustration because I'm really just focusing. I don't like those eyes. I like them better glowing, even if it was a little much. That's okay. He can be a little much. I'm going to tie in this green color because it's very centralized right now to just this area. So I'm going to tie it in through the body, maybe like those veins things. I'm actually going to do this on a new layer above the sketch just because I want them to kind of pop out a bit more and I don't want them to get covered up by the sketch so much. So it doesn't have to be perfect, just like a kind of idea of how that might look. And I don't want to take this too long. We're at the 50-minute mark, so I don't want to be here for too long. Like I said, a lot of times I will, you know, depending on the concept, I might take it much further before I finalize it and move on, or this might be as far as I take it. It just depends on the project, what I need, if I'm going to be modeling it or if someone else is going to be doing it, because I can interpret my own drawings a little bit better than maybe somebody who isn't as familiar with my my process. Maybe, you know, I can kind of I know what I was thinking, where they have to just go off of what they see. So I'm just going to add a little bit of light to some of these. And I am painting over my sketch at this point. I normally do this at one point or another. I will start just working 100% above the sketch. And I'm not worried about layers anymore because I've decided that this is the color scheme I'm working in. This is the shape I'm in. I'm not really doing design anymore. I'm just refining the shapes a bit, giving it, you know, a little bit of like highlights here on the tops of these ridges to make them look more three-dimensional. You know, we want those to pop out. Maybe the claws are black. And same thing over here. Give them some black claws. And make those pop out a bit more. And I'm actually going to refine this now. So I'm going to just merge the whole group together. So I'll do that by just right-clicking anywhere here. Oops, here. And click merge group. So after that I can actually want to collapse that into it as well, so merge layers. So now it's all together, and I'm going to just start cleaning up the edges a little bit. So with my eraser set onto the hard mode, I'm just going to erase in a little bit of extra stuff that I had drawn out, and it was looking a little lumpy, you know. Still not, you know, I'm still not taking it to like a poster or illustration area, I guess. You know, it's still very much obviously a concept art. It is not like what I would consider like a final illustration at any point, but it's just give it a little bit more cleanliness. Alright, he is looking pretty good. Last thing I want to do is just give him a little bit more definition in some of those red spots like I was painting here on the feet. Just finish going up the other side of the leg, to the knee, and into the hand and arms. So he has those same kind of definition details. And I'm just gonna kind of like put some random spots on here to give it a little bit more texture. I want this part to be kind of like rough, like it's like a crab claw. Not even like a crab claw, like more rough than that, because they have some texture, but I want to be a bit more a little ragged around the edges. Just kind of draw some lines in here to indicate that this is kind of like a swirled horn. Color in those a bit more. And I'm gonna get my brush and just add a little bit of like a green into here. Maybe I have this on a new layer, so if I mess up, I'm not at the point where I would have to like erase my whole drawing because I messed up or anything. I'll give him like a slight glow around his eye and pick a slightly brighter color. I don't know if I'll actually be able to get that effect in game because we don't have bloom lighting because we are working in free version, but that's something that it's still nice to have. Last thing I'm going to do is just add a little bit of lighting coming from those eyes to show that they are glowing. So it would be like the underside of here is lit, maybe the underside of here is lit a bit. Turn my opacity down because I don't want it to be too strong, and just work in a bit larger brush. So just to indicate that, this is emitting light. And even if you can't get that effect in necessarily in your engine, it's still nice to have, an indication in your illustration. And if you see that menu popping up, I'm sorry, it comes up when I touch a brush or a button on my Wacom tablet, and even if I don't use it, sometimes I touch it on accident. So creating a little bit of a rebound light or reflected light or whatever. Alright, I think he's looking pretty good. I'm still not sure about the mouth and the eyes glowing together. I feel like it's a little muddled here. It's just, I like it, but I'm not sure. So maybe I'll try it without the mouth glowing. Just get a darker color and back to my basic smooth. Turn my opacity back up. Kind of color that in. I don't know. Well, we'll see. And give it back the shape that I had defined. Yeah, nah, I liked it better glowing. Yeah. We'll just leave it glowing. We'll leave it that way. I like it. I think he sticks out. He's interesting. Last thing I'm going to do is just darken my canvas a bit. It's looking a little too bright, so I'm going to click colorize and turn the saturation up a little bit so I can see. I want it to complement the drawing. So he's in the purple range, purples, reds, and stuff. I'm gonna maybe go for like a bluish purple. Turn the saturation back down, and then darken it. Turn the saturation down. Just find a nice color that kind of balances it. And the last thing I'm gonna do is create this color's just a little too bright. Turn the saturation down. Okay, create a new layer, and I'm going to create just a shadow, a little light shadow underneath him. It's not essential, but I find it's really nice to just ground your character into the environment a little bit so he doesn't feel like he's floating as much. And then just create a tiny bit of rim lighting, and I'm going to do that on the top layer, and just to make him pop out from the background a little bit more. So it does not have to be perfect by any means, but as you can tell, I'm not a perfect artist. It's much more it's an enjoyable thing for me. I love art, but I don't worry about being perfect because it's a learning experience, and I'm more interested in creating an idea than necessarily creating, a visual masterpiece. I'm not creating posters and stuff here. I'm just creating the idea. So I don't worry about it being perfect, just getting the point across. Because does it have a nice shape? Does it have a nice color? Does it have a nice silhouette? Does it, does it read well? And I think he looks good. I think we're done. So I'm going to call it a wrap here, and the next video will be going over creating a model sheet for this character, and that way we will be getting ready to take him into 3ds Max and start modeling him. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to let me know, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Enjoy, and I'll see you next time.